Disease doesn't begin when doctors find it. It begins years earlier, when your body first whispers. After 40, many people live in a strange space between reassurance and reality. The test results say you're fine, but your daily experience quietly disagrees. You wake up in the morning, yet the sleep didn't restore you. Your body moves, but not with the same readiness. Small frustrations feel heavier than they used to. And sometime in the afternoon, your energy drops in a way coffee no longer fixes. Nothing dramatic, nothing you could call an emergency. Just a persistent feeling that your body's working harder to feel normal. So eventually you decide to check. You sit in a clinic room under white lights, blood is drawn, numbers are measured. Days later, the report arrives. Everything. Normal. For a moment, relief appears. Then confusion follows, because nothing changed. Your concentration still fades earlier in the day. You forget why you entered a room. Your patience is thinner than it used to be. Your sleep restores less, even when you stay in bed long enough. You begin negotiating with yourself. Maybe I'm just stressed. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe this is simply age. But the pattern repeats day after day in small, consistent ways. And that consistency is what makes it hard to ignore. Here is something rarely explained clearly. Medical tests are designed to detect disease. They are not designed to detect the earliest decline. Before a condition can be diagnosed, the body spends years compensating. Systems adjust. Hormones rebalance. The brain redistributes energy. Nothing breaks, but nothing feels optimal. So the numbers remain inside the acceptable range, while your lived experience slowly changes outside of it. This is why many people feel dismissed by the word normal. Not because the doctor is wrong, but because the measurement belongs to a later stage than the one you're living in. Your body notices instability before instruments detect damage. It whispers through fatigue, through irritability, through slower recovery and uneven focus. These are not yet illnesses, they are signals, the earlier stage of change. This video is not about diagnosing disease. It is about understanding why your body can sense a problem years before medicine can confirm it. Because for many adults after 40, the first abnormal result does not mark the beginning. It marks the moment a long-running process finally became visible. To understand why you can feel unwell while tests remain normal, you have to see health the way the body experiences it, not the way reports display it. Most people imagine disease as an event. One day you are healthy, another day something appears. But biology doesn't work in events, it works in timelines. Every long-term condition follows a gradual progression, not a moment, a process. First comes functional change, then silent damage. Only much later comes diagnosis. Medicine is very good at identifying the third stage. Your body lives in the first. Functional change is subtle. Cells still work, but less efficiently. Energy production fluctuates. Hormones shift slightly. The nervous system adapts to maintain balance. At this stage, no organ has failed. No structure is destroyed. Nothing alarming appears on a scan. But performance declines. You need more effort for the same task. Recovery takes longer than before. Focus becomes inconsistent. Sleep stops feeling restorative. From a laboratory perspective, everything remains acceptable. Because laboratory ranges are designed around disease thresholds, not optimal function. They answer a specific question. Is pathology present? They do not answer a different question. Is the system operating the way it used to? Years can pass in this stage. Then comes silent damage. Now the body begins to compensate continuously rather than occasionally. Insulin rises to maintain blood sugar. Stress hormones increase to maintain alertness. Inflammation stays slightly elevated to maintain repair. You still function, but at a biological cost. This is when afternoon fatigue becomes predictable. When mood tolerance shortens. When minor discomforts appear and disappear without clear cause. Again, most tests remain normal, because compensation hides deterioration. The body's remarkably protective. It sacrifices efficiency to preserve stability. Numbers stay steady precisely because the system is working harder behind the scenes. Only after compensation can no longer keep balance does diagnosis appear. Blood sugar finally rises, blood pressure remains elevated, cholesterol patterns shift enough to cross a defined boundary. From a medical standpoint, this is the beginning. From the body's standpoint, this is late. The timeline may span 5, 10, sometimes 15 years between the first functional change and measurable disease. During that entire period, people often say the same sentence: I knew something was off. Not pain, not disability, just a persistent sense of reduced capacity. Modern healthcare is not failing when it says you are normal. It is answering a different stage of the timeline. Medicine confirms structural change. You're experiencing functional change. Neither is incorrect. They're simply observing different layers of reality. So the gap between how you feel and what tests show is not imagined. It is a difference between early biological signals and late diagnostic thresholds. Understanding this removes unnecessary fear. Feeling different does not mean illness is present, but it does mean the body has begun adapting, and adaptation always comes before detection. In the next part, we'll explore why the nervous system, especially the brain, senses these changes earlier than any laboratory instrument can measure them. If medical tests measure the later stages of change, why are you able to sense it so early? The answer lies in how the body prioritizes survival. Not all systems are equal. Some exist to keep you alive. Others exist to help you function well. When resources become limited, even slightly, the body protects survival first and performance second. And the organ that reveals this trade-off earliest is the brain. The brain consumes a remarkable portion of your daily energy. Though it represents only a small percentage of body weight, it demands a constant, stable fuel supply. It cannot store energy well, and it cannot tolerate instability for long. So when cellular energy production becomes less efficient, even by a small amount, the brain notices immediately, not as pain, not as disease, but as reduced clarity. You call it brain fog, slower thinking, difficulty finding words, reading the same sentence twice, forgetting why you walked into a room. These are not random lapses, they are early energy conservation strategies. Your brain begins lowering non-essential output to preserve essential function. Focus narrows, motivation drops, patience shortens, nothing is broken, the system is adapting. At the same time, emotional tolerance decreases. Small irritations feel larger, noise feels more exhausting, decisions feel heavier than before. This happens because emotional regulation requires significant neurological energy. When fuel becomes inconsistent, the brain simplifies reactions. You become efficient rather than flexible. Sleep changes for the same reason. And many people notice they still sleep the same number of hours, yet wake less restored. Deep sleep requires coordinated hormonal signaling and stable metabolic activity. When regulation weakens, sleep becomes lighter, even if duration remains. Again, no disease has appeared, but performance has shifted. The nervous system is not diagnosing illness, it is reporting stability. Laboratory tests measure structure, levels, counts, and concentrations. The brain measures continuity, the smoothness of operation across the day. A person may remain inside all normal ranges yet lose resilience. And resilience is what most people actually feel as health. This is why fatigue after 40 often feels unfamiliar. It is not simply less energy, it is less predictable energy. Good mornings followed by sudden crashes. Clear thinking followed by mental haze. Motivation present one day and absent the next. Machines measure the average. Your brain experiences the fluctuations. Over time, the body attempts to stabilize those fluctuations using compensation. Stress hormones rise earlier in the day to push alertness. Cravings increase to supply faster fuel. Inflammatory signals stay slightly elevated to accelerate repair. These adjustments help you function, but they are experienced subjectively. You feel wired at night but tired in the morning. hungry soon after eating, rested only briefly after rest. None of these confirm disease. They confirm adaptation. The nervous system is effectively the earliest monitoring device the body has. It detects instability long before measurable damage occurs. So when people say, "I just don't feel like myself anymore," they are often describing a regulatory change, not a diagnosable condition. Understanding this distinction matters because it explains why reassurance from a report and discomfort in daily life can exist together. The body is not contradicting the test. It is speaking from an earlier point on the timeline. In the next section, we'll map the specific early signals most adults experience, the common patterns that appear long before diagnosis ever does. Long before a diagnosis appears, the body repeats certain patterns, not dramatic symptoms, not medical emergencies, just small changes that become familiar enough to ignore. Individually, each one seems harmless. Together, they form a message. Here are the signals most people begin to notice after 40, often years before any measurable disease exists. You wake up relatively normal, morning functions well enough. But sometime between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, your body slows in a way it never used to. Not simple tiredness, more like a sudden reduction in capacity. You reread the same sentence several times. You delay small tasks. Conversations require more effort to follow. Coffee helps less than it once did. Rest helps only briefly. This happens because energy regulation is becoming less stable, not because energy is gone. Your system still produces fuel, just not evenly. Your reactions feel faster than your intentions. Minor inconveniences irritate you more than they should. Noise feels intrusive. Interruptions feel exhausting. You often regret the reaction moments later. This is not personality change. Emotional regulation requires neurological flexibility. When the brain conserves energy, flexibility is reduced. You respond efficiently instead of thoughtfully. You still sleep roughly the same number of hours, sometimes even longer, yet mornings feel heavier. You wake already tired, or you wake repeatedly without clear reason. The issue is not duration, it is depth. Restorative sleep depends on stable metabolic rhythm. When internal signals fluctuate, sleep becomes lighter even while you remain in bed. So the body rests, but recovery does not fully occur. You begin wanting quick energy more often. Sweet foods, snacks soon after meals, evening hunger despite adequate eating earlier. This is rarely about discipline. The body seeks faster fuel when steady energy supply weakens. Cravings are not a failure of control. They are a request for stability. A shoulder one week, a knee the next, a lower backache that appears and fades. Nothing severe enough to treat, nothing lasting long enough to investigate, but frequent enough to notice. Repair processes are becoming less efficient. Minor inflammation resolves slower than before, so discomfort travels instead of settling. You remain capable, but less consistent. Names take longer to recall. Multitasking feels heavier. You enter a room and forget the purpose. Later, the memory returns. This is not loss, it is delay. The brain prioritizes essential function and postpones non-essential retrieval when resources fluctuate. Each of these signals alone appears ordinary. Together, they describe regulation becoming less stable. No organ is failing, no disease is formed, but the body is working harder to maintain balance. Many people dismiss these changes because they do not match the idea of illness, and they are correct. These are not diseases. They are the stage before disease, the stage where adaptation quietly replaces efficiency. In the next section, we'll explore why laboratory results can remain normal throughout this entire period, and why normal does not always mean unchanged. After noticing these patterns, many people seek reassurance through testing. The expectation is simple. If something feels different, something measurable should confirm it. Yet the report returns unchanged. Inside every laboratory result is a concept most people never see: the reference range. A reference range does not describe optimal health. It describes statistical normality. To create it, Measurements are collected from a large population, and the middle majority becomes the boundary of normal. This means the range reflects what is common, not what is ideal. A person can move significantly within that range while experiencing a meaningful shift in function. From the body's perspective, stability matters more than position. If a value used to stay consistently in one place and now drifts toward the edge of the range, the body experiences change even though the report does not label it abnormal. Laboratory tests are designed to detect structural disturbance, damage, deficiency, or pathology. They are not designed to detect early adaptation. The body, however, prioritizes preservation. When regulation weakens, compensation begins. Hormones adjust slightly to maintain balance. Metabolism shifts to maintain fuel supply. Inflammatory signals rise just enough to maintain repair. Each adjustment keeps measurable values steady. The result appears reassuring precisely because the body is working harder behind the scenes. This is why numbers often remain stable during the period when people first notice fatigue, irritability, and reduced resilience. The system is active, not failing. Medical thresholds exist for clarity and safety. They indicate when intervention is necessary, not when change begins. There is a wide territory between perfect regulation and diagnosable disease. Most adults spend years in that territory. During this time, the body trades efficiency for stability. It uses more effort to produce the same outcome. Energy becomes less predictable. Recovery becomes slower. Stress tolerance narrows. Yet laboratory values remain inside acceptable limits because compensation succeeds. Only when compensation can no longer maintain balance do numbers finally cross a boundary. From a clinical perspective, this moment marks the beginning. From a biological perspective, it marks the end of adaptation. Understanding this removes a common misunderstanding. A normal test does not always mean nothing is happening, and it means nothing irreversible has occurred yet. The distinction is important. One describes absence of damage, the other describes absence of change. Early change rarely appears as a broken system. It appears as a system under increasing load. People often feel this as effort. More effort to focus, more effort to stay patient, more effort to recover after ordinary days. The report confirms safety, but experience reflects cost. Both are true at the same time. When you feel different while results remain normal, the body is not contradicting medicine. It is speaking from an earlier stage than medicine is designed to define. In the next section, we will look at the process quietly driving much of this adaptation. The slow rise of internal inflammation, and why it changes how the body feels long before it changes how the body measures. Beneath these early changes, another process often develops quietly. Not an infection, not swelling you can see, not pain that forces attention. A low, steady activation of the body's defense system. Inflammation is usually imagined as something obvious: redness, heat, injury. But the same biological system also operates at a much lower level, continuously adjusting repair, cleanup, and protection. When you're young, activation rises and falls quickly. The body responds, resolves the problem, and returns to baseline. Over time, resolution becomes slower. The signals that turn inflammation off weaken slightly, while the signals that turn it on remain sensitive. The result is not intense inflammation, but persistent background activity. Nothing dramatic happens. Instead, recovery becomes incomplete. After a poor night of sleep, the body feels heavier the next day. After stress, tension remains longer than before. After physical effort, soreness lingers. The experience is subtle but consistent. The system resets more slowly. This ongoing activity affects regulation across the body. Energy production becomes less efficient because cellular repair competes for resources. Hormonal rhythms shift slightly because the brain interprets ongoing repair as demand. Sleep becomes lighter because the nervous system stays more alert than restorative. You do not feel sick, you feel less refreshed. This is why many people describe a sense of never fully recovered. Even after rest, a small residue of fatigue remains. The body is prioritizing maintenance. Low-level inflammation also changes appetite and cravings. The brain requests quicker energy sources because rapid fuel supports immediate regulation. So hunger appears sooner after meals. Sweet or dense foods feel unusually appealing. This is not simply habit, it is communication. The system seeks stability in the fastest way available. Muscles and joints reflect the same process. Small discomforts shift location rather than intensify. Repair happens, but slowly enough that awareness persists. Again, no disease is formed. The process remains below clinical thresholds. Standard testing looks for strong inflammatory signals, the kind associated with infection or active illness. Low-grade activation often stays beneath those markers, so results remain normal while experience changes. The nervous system senses this state continuously. It adjusts alertness, mood, and focus to conserve resources. Motivation fluctuates because the brain balances effort with available capacity. Patience shortens because flexibility requires surplus energy. These reactions are not failures of discipline, they are adaptations to background demand. Over years, this quiet activity becomes the environment in which other conditions eventually appear. Not as a sudden event, but as accumulated load. Understanding this stage is important because it explains a common feeling: functioning but not thriving. You can work, think, and live normally. Yet something feels slightly heavier than it once did. The body is stable, but it is no longer effortless. Nothing here confirms illness. It confirms ongoing adjustment. In the next section, we'll look at what finally happens when compensation reaches its limit. The moment people receive a diagnosis and realize the process began long before that day. Eventually a day arrives that feels official. You return to the clinic. The same process as before, questions, measurements, waiting. But this time the conversation changes. A number has crossed a boundary. A label is introduced. Monitoring becomes treatment. From a medical standpoint, this is the beginning of the condition. From a personal standpoint, it rarely feels like a surprise. Many people respond in almost the same way. I thought something was off years ago. Not because they predicted the diagnosis, but because the body had been signaling a change long before it could be named. The difference between feeling and confirmation suddenly becomes clear. For years, the experience was subtle, energy inconsistent, recovery slower, tolerance narrower, none of it urgent enough to act on, none of it measurable enough to define. So life continued normally, responsibilities remained, work schedules stayed full, family routines went on unchanged. The body adapted quietly in the background while attention stayed on daily demands. By the time numbers shift, the adaptation period has already passed. What was once flexible has become fixed. Compensation is no longer sufficient to hold stability, so the system stops hiding the change. This is why diagnosis often feels delayed rather than sudden. The condition did not appear that day. That day it became visible. Many people remember specific moments in hindsight. The period when afternoons became hard to manage, when sleep stopped restoring energy, when patience shortened without clear reason. At the time, these were interpreted as stress, aging, or circumstance. Yet only later do they form a timeline. Medicine requires thresholds to create clarity. Without them, treatment would be uncertain. But biology does not follow thresholds. It follows gradual progression. Between the earlier signal and the official label, years often pass unnoticed. During those years, the body remains functional. You continue working, driving, thinking, caring for others. Nothing forces attention because capability is preserved. Yet effort increases slowly enough that adaptation feels normal. When the diagnosis finally arrives, it organizes the past. The scattered experiences gain context. The fatigue was not random. The irritability was not personality. The cravings were not lack of discipline. They were early adjustments to maintain balance. Understanding this does not change the present condition. But it changes interpretation. It replaces self-doubt with awareness. You did not imagine the change. You experienced the beginning of it. This realization is often both unsettling and relieving. Unsettling because the process began earlier than expected. Relieving because the experience finally makes sense. The important lesson is not about predicting illness. It is about recognizing that the body communicates long before confirmation exists. Diagnosis marks the point where adaptation can no longer conceal change. But communication started long before that moment. In the next section, we'll shift from looking backward to looking forward. How to listen to these early signals without fear, and what awareness actually allows you to do differently. After understanding how early signals appear, a natural question follows. If the body speaks before diagnosis, what should you actually do with that information? The goal is not to search constantly for disease, and it is not to treat every sensation as a warning. The goal is awareness, recognizing patterns rather than reacting to isolated moments. Health rarely changes in a single day. It shifts through repetition. One poor night of sleep means little. 10 nights forming a pattern means something. One afternoon of fatigue is ordinary. Daily predictable exhaustion at the same hour is communication. The body does not speak through intensity. It speaks through consistency. Listening therefore requires attention to rhythm, not perfection. Instead of asking, "Do I feel bad today?" a more useful question becomes, "Am I functioning differently than I used to over time?" This removes anxiety and replaces it with observation. You begin noticing recovery speed, how quickly energy returns after effort, how stable focus remains across the day, how restorative sleep feels across a week rather than a night. None of these demand immediate correction. They simply inform you about regulation. Many people only respond once change becomes disruptive. But the earlier stage offers something valuable: flexibility. At this point, systems still adapt easily. Small adjustments produce noticeable effects because stability has not yet been lost. That is why early awareness feels subtle but powerful. Not because action must be urgent, because action can be gentle. Extremes are rarely required. The body responds best to consistency. Regular sleep timing stabilizes hormonal rhythm. Moderate daily movement restores energy signaling. Predictable meals reduce compensatory cravings. These are not treatments for illness. They are signals of safety to the nervous system. When the body perceives stability, it reduces compensation. Energy becomes steadier. Mood becomes less reactive. Sleep deepens gradually rather than suddenly. Nothing dramatic happens in a single day. Instead, effort decreases. You feel less like you are maintaining normal function, and more like normal function returns on its own. Awareness also changes interpretation. Fatigue stops meaning weakness. It becomes information about load. Irritability stops meaning personality. It reflects reduced flexibility. Cravings stop meaning failure. They signal unstable fuel availability. This shift removes blame and adds understanding. The body is not opposing you, it is informing you. When people learn to notice these early signals, they often discover something reassuring. Many changes are reversible long before they are diagnosable. Not because a specific intervention cures them, because regulation naturally restores when pressure decreases. The earlier stage is defined by adaptation, and adaptation works both directions. Stress increases load, recovery reduces it. The system moves accordingly. Listening earlier does not mean living cautiously. It means living attentively. Instead of waiting for confirmation, you respond to patterns. Instead of fearing future illness, you improve present stability. In the final part, we will bring this idea together: why health is rarely lost suddenly, and why paying attention early changes the entire timeline of aging. Most people imagine health as something that disappears in a moment. A diagnosis arrives, a number crosses a line, life suddenly changes, but the body does not work in sudden endings. It works in long timelines. Long before disease has a name, balance begins to shift. Long before measurements change, regulation adapts. And long before a doctor confirms anything, the body has already started communicating. What we often call aging is not a single process. It is a gradual negotiation between stability and demand. Each year, the body invests more effort to maintain the same result. At first, the difference is invisible. You function normally, you live normally. Then the difference becomes noticeable only to you. Energy varies more than it used to. Recovery takes longer. Focus becomes less predictable. Or nothing stops you from living your life, but living requires more intention than before. This stage matters because it is the only time when change remains quiet and flexible. After diagnosis, action becomes necessary. Before diagnosis, awareness is enough. The purpose of understanding early signals is not to worry about the future. It is to recognize the present. Health rarely leaves without introduction. It fades slowly, giving many small notices instead of one large warning. Most people ignore those notices because they expect something dramatic. Yet the body prefers subtlety. A shorter attention span, a heavier morning, an earlier fatigue in the afternoon. Not problems, messages. When you understand this, reassurance and awareness can exist together. A normal report means you are safe. Your experience tells you how stable that safety feels. Neither needs to cancel the other. They simply describe different points along the same timeline. So the goal is not to search for illness. The goal is to stay connected to the process while it is still adjustable. Because health is rarely protected in a single decision. It is protected in small responses repeated over time. If this perspective helped you understand your body a little more clearly, consider following the channel. Not for alarms or predictions, but to learn how to notice change early, while it is still gentle enough to guide rather than force.